boxing news.
Conor Benn versus Chris Eubank 2. Let's talk about the fight.
Rematch.
Very different aesthetic to their initial meeting.
Yes.
Different outcome as well. We didn't see any nervous energy from Conor Benn at the start. That was noticeable. He was a lot more controlled, composed. His approach was a lot more measured. Where in the first fight, he came out guns blazing like a bat out of hell, throwing wild hooks and haymakers and going for a home run. He was a lot more reserved this time, staying behind straight punches, using the jab. You saw that a lot. A lot of jabs from Conor Benn. A lot of backhands, a lot of straight punches, jabs, backhands, crosses, where Chris Eubank Jr. looked a step behind Conor Benn at every turn, lethargic, every day, every week, and every month of 36 years old. He looked a step behind Conor from the opening bell to the final. Times Conor Benn closing the distance, using the jab effectively to touch Chris Eubank Jr. on the way in, at which point Chris would try to respond with 3-punch combinations. He looked slow as molasses. Looked a step behind Conor Benn, the noticeably smaller man and the noticeably faster of the two.
Fast.
Very sharp, very tight. Better technique the second time out from Conor Benn than Chris Eubank Jr. One of these fighters came back better in the rematch, and that was young Conroy. But the byproduct of that more measured approach was a fight that was not as exciting as the first time out. He didn't throw caution to the wind like he did before. He was a lot more measured. Thus, this fight was not as exciting. Not as up and down, not as back and forth. I believe that Conor Benn won yesterday because he came back better. No nervous energy like the first time out, not throwing caution to the wind, using his boxing. That's honestly what I believe won him the fight. Better technique in the rematch, though others are pointing to Chris Eubank Jr.'s physical condition. Hall of Fame promoter Lou DiBella said, it's called weight drained. It's called dead before you started. Which would seem like wisdom if that weren't the same Lou DiBella who said before the fight, he can fight the guy 10 times and the result will be the same. Oh, so he picked Chris to win a rematch? Yeah, he did. He said Conor can fight Chris 10 times and the result would be the same 10 times. So for that same Lou DiBella to then start moaning about weight, I swear to God, that guy's so full of shit. My honest opinion is that those pointing to Chris Eubank Jr.'s weight situation are only doing so to deprive Conor Benn of his just due, of his credit, because the circumstances from the first fight into the second are not so dramatically different or time-lapse. There's not some gargantuan amount of time in between the second fight and the first. Need I remind you that the first fight was just a few months ago? Chris Eubank Jr. was not subject to anything yesterday that he wasn't already subject to in the first fight, but he won the first one and lost the second. Why? Because Conor Benn came back better. Conor Benn did not fight in the second fight the way he fought in the first. In the first, there was a lot of nervous energy and he did a lot of jumping in, wasting punches, wasting energy in the process, coming out guns blazing, looking to empty the tank at the start of the fight left him depleted towards the end of it, opening the door for Chris Eubank Jr. to take over in the first fight. Whereas in the second, because Conor chose a more measured approach, didn't waste as many punches, didn't waste as much energy, Conor didn't get tired in the second half like he did before. No door for Chris Eubank Jr. to find his way into the fight. You're thinking to yourself, Chris looked diminished. Not saying that he didn't, but Chris getting off to a slow start in this fight is the same thing that we saw in the first one. Need I remind you that in the first fight, Chris Eubank Jr. didn't do a whole lot at the start. It was almost like he was playing possum, waiting for Conor to get tired. Go back and watch it. Go back and watch the first fight. Chris wasn't doing much of anything at the start. It's not until Conor really starts to get tired that he really starts to take over. That's the difference from the first fight into the second one. Now, veteran boxing scribe Chris Mannix said this Eubank was weight drained narrative is wildly disrespectful to what Conor Benn did. Is 160 hard to make? Yes, but Eubank has made it for 6 straight fights. Is the rehydration clause tough? Yes, but Eubank had a tougher time in the last fight and won. This fight was about Conor. I remember in the first fight, at the very start, when Conor Benn is actually getting in with punches, visibly hurting Chris Eubank Jr., rattling his cage. Conor was hurting Chris in the first fight, especially in the first half. So that in the second, When he takes a more measured approach and doesn't waste as much of his energy at the start, he has more to give towards the end, which is how he was able to knock Chris down, what was it, 2 or 3 times?
2 in the last round.
The biggest difference between the first fight and the second is not that Chris was dramatically older or dramatically weight drained because he was able to win the first one. The biggest difference between the first fight and the second is that Conor came back better. He tried a different approach, and it worked.
That's all.
I agree with Chris Mannix that this whole Eubank was weight-drained narrative is just that, a narrative. A way to disparage Conor Benn's win over Chris Eubank Jr., a way to not give Conor credit for coming back better, even though that's what he did.
Why don't people want to give Conor credit?
The doping fiasco. You know, there's still a lot of people out there that are angry about the doping fiasco.
After the fight, to my surprise, Chris Eubank Jr. didn't make any excuses, didn't bring up consumption of eggs, didn't bring up weight stipulations. Chris didn't make any excuses afterwards.
So don't make any excuses for him.
Yeah, I've been through hell and back to get to this night, and you know, it is what it is. I tried my best, and listen, the kid fought hard, he fought tough. He's got power, this kid. You know, he was bigger than me on the scouts. I don't know how you did it. I'm looking at him, he's 168. I'm like, what the hell's going on? But listen, we put on a show, yeah, Conor Benn was the best man tonight, so congratulations to him.
The post-fight interview, Chris Eubank Jr. said he needs time to heal before thinking about his future. I'm not in the state of mind to talk about fights or rivalries. I need to think, heal, and deal with what I'm dealing with. His boxing path now hangs in the balance. Some are calling for Chris Eubank Jr. to retire based on what they saw yesterday. I think that he would have made enough money from his last 2 fights, just the last 2 with Conroy, to retire on.
Not even counting whatever else he made before that, which he's likely spent on gaudy jackets with oversized collars.
The Eubank family has always had a penchant for the theatrical. I half expected that if Conor Benn won the rematch, there would be a trilogy that follows it, though based on the aesthetic of yesterday's fight, that doesn't look to be happening in tandem with what Conor Benn said after the fight. I think we should just let it lie now. We've done what we had to do. We sold out a stadium twice, which they did. Ahead of the fight, I felt that there's a lot of money in a rematch already. There could be a lot more money in a trilogy if Conor gets revenge, which he did. Though if now a trilogy is not going to be explored and Conor doesn't have the physical dimensions to campaign as a middleweight even though he beat Chris, what is Conor gonna do now? If it's not a trilogy, then what?
Well, Conor did say after the fight, any of those Yanks can get it. I fancy Mario Barrios, Ryan Garcia, Rolly Romero, Heaven Daney. Any of those Yanks can get it. Conor Benn wants all the smoke. I remember ahead of this weekend's fight hearing from Eddie Hearn that Conor Benn, he can still get down to 147. He doesn't walk around that heavy, and that's what he's talking about now, returning to the welterweight division where he has not fought since April of 2022 against Chris Van Heerden 3 years ago. 3 years later, having fought at junior middle and subsequently middle, can Conor actually get back down to 147? And not just get there, but get there match fit. Get there safely and able to perform.
I don't have the answer to that question. I just know that that's what young Conroy means to do. He means to return to 147. It doesn't really get said enough that Conor Benn, he's just not big enough to campaign as a middleweight, you know.
He can't stay there.
Granted that he could always drop down to 154. 154 is a deep blue sea with a lot of sharks in it that I don't know it would be safe for Conor to campaign there either. On the face of it, I can't think of a champion at junior middle that Conor would be able to win a belt from, but at 147 he might, if he can get there.
Conor doesn't beat Xander Zayas. He doesn't beat Abbas Baru. He doesn't beat Bakram Murtazaliev. He doesn't. We all know that.
Look like a fish out of water. Standing next to Sebastian Fundora, there are enough junior middleweights that Sebastian towers over that Conor would look like a hobbit.
154 is not the move. 147, if he can get there, there is a chance he could win a title there. It's weaker than 154, not as deep.
I can't Conor Benn, take nothing away from him. He got the job done. Well done, fair play. I can't take anything away from it. He lost to a faded Eubank, and then he just beat a shot to bits one. That don't make that. He's not 147. He's not 147 champion elect on the back of that.
No, can he win a world title at 147 now though?
Maybe, but the champions aren't. They're not A-level champions. They're like the B-level champions. Barrios, Crocker, they're very good fighters. Well, they're not great fighters, but I'm still not sure he'll beat him. I don't think Conor Benn's a fantastic boxer. Nigel Benn, 1990, Nigel Benn would have flattened Chris Eubank Jr. in one round tonight. That's the honest truth.
Yeah, again, but it's unfair, isn't it, to compare both of them lads to the previous.
It's not unfair when Eddie Hearn's saying this man's going to go to 147 and smash everyone to bits.
No, he's not.
He's not that good.
No, but that's Eddie Hearn's job, isn't it, as the salesman, as the promoter.
I'm just telling things how I see it.
That's why you're here.
There's no point in me standing here and saying it was amazing. It weren't. It was.
But he's got the strength and the tenacity and the belief to be a world champion at 147.
I sold 8,500 tickets at Sheffield, not because I'm a great fighter, because people like me. They've done 70,000 in here tonight because of the story with the dads. Yeah. Amazing. I'm for it. Met loads of money. What we saw in there tonight weren't world-class boxing. No. Weren't even close. Not even close. Wasn't even close. Not close. And they're saying he's 147 elect champion. Not even close to being world title.
No, I think we agree with that.
Poor. But both of them weren't great. Eubank was terrible. Benn didn't do anything amazing. He just beat a shell of an old man up.
Yet another unimpressed spectator and veteran fighter Dave Allen, who doesn't think that was a world-class showing yesterday from either fighter. All Conor Benn did was beat an old man, a man who had fallen off a cliff, though two things can be true at the same time, because what Dave also said is that the champions at 147 are B-tier champions, B-class.
That gives Conor Benn a good chance, if he can return to the welterweight division match fit, the chance to become a world champion himself, and that in and of itself is worth something. I'm not expecting Conor Benn to go on and become a pound-for-pound fighter, top 5.
Most fighters won't. Most fighters in America, most fighters in Mexico, or the United Kingdom. He's not going to be part of that short list, I don't think. But that doesn't mean he can't be a good fighter, and that doesn't mean he can't do good for himself. He already has. Look at the amount of people that turned out for his last 2 fights. His fights with Chris. And that's all without a world title. So that if he can win one...
Shit, that's even better.
Chris Eubank Jr. never did that. Chris Eubank Jr. never won a full world title from one of the 4 major sanctioning bodies. He never did that. Maybe Conor can. He's already broken the generational curse. Before yesterday, no Benn held a win over any Eubank.
He changed that.
You know what I think is really rubbing people the wrong way? They know how much Eddie Hearn is invested in the career of Conor Benn, and they just don't like the idea that Conor, of all people, is Britain's next star. After that doping fiasco, they want him to stay the villain, stay the bad guy. Maybe he will.
In their eyes.
Still in traction, though. Whether people like it or not, Conor Benn in the United Kingdom is box office. He's a star, especially after yesterday, more so if he can return to welterweight and fight those names. Ryan Garcia, Devin Haney, Brian Norman if he beats Devin.
Mario Barrios if he beats Ryan.
Though why did Conor Benn name those names specifically? Why is he so focused on going after the Yanks, as it were?
Why didn't he mention Lewis Crocker?
Newly crowned IBF champion? I myself noticed that Lewis Crocker was not mentioned on Conor Benn's short list of names he now wants to go after. He didn't mention the newly crowned IBF champion, who I always thought was within proximity of Conor, that after this fight with Chris, after this rematch, he should probably go after that guy. I noticed that he didn't mention him, and so did Lewis.
Lewis Crocker took to his Instagram stories and said, "How the fuck was my name not even mentioned post-fight? I'm one of the only 2 UK world champions in the world at the moment, and at that, I'm the only welterweight world champion, and Barrios is being brought up, and as fellow matchroom fighter, I'm not even spoke about? Let's do this. The UK fans deserve it."
Is that really Lewis Crocker's skin in the game? What the UK fans deserve? No, he wants a payday. He knows what Conor Benn is worth. He knows that a fight between him and Conor will pay him out the biggest purse he's ever had. And that's what he's after. I'm not against it. Just don't pee on my leg and tell me it's raining. Don't try to make it about the fans. It's about your pocket.
Won't somebody please think about the fans?
I think that Lewis Crocker has his own problems. Just beyond the horizon, because his old buddy Paddy Donovan is going to be traveling to Australia to box Liam Bottle, former Matchroom fighter, for mandatory status. Whoever wins that fight becomes Lewis's problem. Lewis is mandatory. It could be Paddy that he has to fight again in a trilogy, or it could be Liam.
That's still a good shout, though. Conor Benn versus Lewis Crocker does do business in the UK. Why didn't they mention him?
The rehydration cap is my guess. There's a lot of guys that ain't in no hurry to fight for the IBF title. We talk about it all the time. The reason for it is the IBF has a rehydration cap. So for a fighter like Conor Benn, who hasn't made welterweight in about 3 going on 4 years, you don't want to be subject to no rehydration cap. You're already going to have to boil down to a lighter weight than you've had to in a very long time. That when you do, you don't want a cap on how much weight you can gain after the weigh-in. You asked me!
Me!
Why didn't they mention Lewis Crocker? Makes enough sense. Why didn't they do it? The rehydration cap is why.
Conor don't want to deal with that shit. You seen how much Chris was whining about it? Do you think Conor now wants to be subject to one? I don't think so. So if Conor can get down to welter and win some other alphabet title first, before he challenges for the IBF, then he won't be subject to nothing. Remember, the IBF waives that rehydration cap for unification matches. If Conor can win a belt and Lewis still has his, maybe then Lewis will get his crack at the apple, his shot at the big time.
But not until then. Conor Benn just fought yesterday. I think we are several months out from Conor Benn's next ring appearance. I don't expect to see Conor Benn in the ring until the second quarter of next year, at the earliest. And when we do, I do not expect it to be Lewis Crocker that he fights. Not right away, not his first fight back at 147. Hell, his next fight might be somewhere in between 147 and 154.
So he might fight Lewis. He might, but not yet. And that's why they didn't mention them. They mentioned everybody else. Fighting those guys don't require no rehydration cap.
Lewis is chomping at the bit to get his hands on Conroy, especially in what could be his first fight back at 147, when he might be depleted.
Looking to turn the tables on Conroy, make him subject to what Chris Eubank Jr. was just subject to. It's all very apparent.
Fighters are opportunists. Pretty much everybody in the sport of boxing, the fighters, the managers, the promoters, even the fans in some instances, are all opportunists. And that's what Lewis Crocker.
Well, that's what he is, an opportunist, saying the UK fans deserve it. That ain't who you're thinking about.
In any event, Conor Benn came back an improved fighter yesterday. I think he deserves some credit for that. And while wasn't necessarily a world-class win for Conor Benn, neither guy looked all that much world-class yesterday, it was still a big win for Conor. I mean, look at how many people showed up.
They filled out a stadium, so it was still a big fight. It was still a significant win, even if it wasn't a world-class win. And that's okay. Just chalk it up to being a developmental fight with a very big profile. Think about it that way. Put it in that perspective.
A developmental fight for Conor Benn, who's still growing and still learning and still improving, that was worth a lot of money.